Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this Q&A session with IDP Chair candidates hosted by Benoit County Dems. This is a two-part series. Tonight is going to be with Fred Cornforth, and tomorrow night with Evangeline Beechler Lincoln at 6 p.m. Pacific. Unless there are objections by anybody, I will be recording both meetings and posting them later so that people who couldn't make it can watch at their own convenience. I've already talked with Fred and he's okay with that. I'm going to start by giving the candidate a moment to be introduced, and then I would like them to tell us in their words their pitch for why they should be the next chair of Idaho Dems and share with us their vision of Idaho Dems going forward. And then we're going to open it up so that we can all ask questions. So to that end, to introduce Fred, I'm going to pass the mic over to two-term U.S. House Representative for Idaho, Larry LaRocco.
Well, thank you so much, James. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, great. Good to see everybody. And thanks so much for passing the mic over. I'm just going to take a minute of your time with this introduction. Fred and I serve on the board of the Frank Church Institute at Boise State University. And our theme and our mission is how democracies survive and thrive in the 21st century. So we're working on that. And all we had to do was experience the last 4 years to know how fragile our democracy is and how tenuous, the balance is between authoritarianism and we almost went over the brink. And I rarely get involved in party politics. I've been a candidate 7 times in Idaho, and thanks to many of you, I was elected to the House of Representatives. But I got to know Fred during the Biden campaign. He and I I co-chaired the Biden campaign in Idaho. And I just got to know him. He's got a vision for Idaho, where we want to go to recruit candidates, to be inclusive, to fill every precinct slot across the state, and to communicate to Idahoans our values as Democrats. I'll just finish by saying we are a great state, but we will be a greater state with a vibrant two-party system. And we've got to put our uniforms on and get on the field. And I think Fred will help us do that. So he's got my unqualified support, and I'm helping him every way I can. And thanks so much for spending time with Fred tonight and with us. And thank you again for your support of my candidacy in the past. It was a great honor to serve you in the House of Representatives. Thanks, James.
Larry, thank you for that introduction. And I've just put $5 in the mail to you. So thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. But hey, Jimmy, thank you for hosting this, and Kathy too, for the extension of the invitation to speak to you all. I'm talking to you from Boise, Idaho. I happen to be an Idahoan. I'm a native. I was born in Blackfoot, but I've developed all around the state. It was interesting. Last fall, I was looking at a map of the state, and I've actually been in every single county in our state before I even thought about getting more directly involved in politics. And we have a wonderful place, don't we, to call home. But there's some unique challenges. And those of you in Northern Idaho know that there are very unique challenges to North Idaho. And every part of our state is wide and it's tall. And there are at least, 6 or 7 dialects of Idahoan, as I like to call it, that we need to learn how to speak. And unless we're listening, which is, to me, the moment we stop listening to our people, that's when we stop leading. And we've got to listen. And I have enjoyed talking with over half of you that are on the call tonight already, and have just learned so much about what your take is on things and such. But I wanted to talk to you about probably the single greatest contribution that I hope to make as chair of our party for the state is to turn Idaho back again into a battleground state. I want to get us to the point where we can compete and go nose to nose with the Republican Party. And the radicalization of it is even a greater motivator to me to make sure that, we get in the political gym. We got to lift weights. We got to do our push-ups. We got to watch what we eat. We got to watch how we spend our money. We've got to direct and surgically guide ourselves in a holistic way in trying to bring about change in Idaho. I don't think that it is as far off as we might realize. And I realize some people say, well, he's just an optimist. But as a businessman, I've gone into some things thinking I was going to make money and I didn't. But at the same time, there's a direct proportion to effort and experience and working together as a team and bringing about a different result. And I really think that we can turn Idaho into a battleground state. The way I want to do that, number one, first of all, is that we need to start at the grassroots, at the precinct, county, and legislative district levels, and create strategic plans at each of those levels that will allow us to catch the nuances of our local communities. There are, especially in North Idaho, there's some unique challenges because we have groups that are just flat out dangerous. I don't think that in other parts of Idaho that individuals that are part of our party think about the unique challenges that some of you have to face day to day. But you also see, because of the dominance of the party in North Idaho with the Republicans, you see them putting out publications that get to tell the story of who they think we are. And it's not who we are. But if we start at the legislative level and the county level and develop messages unique to each of our counties, and then bring that up into a regional plan, that allows us to hit on those very things that we're identifying that we need to address. That's one of the things that I'm hoping to do too at the state level, is make grants available to our smaller counties that are getting overrun by the money that exists in some of these radical groups, so we can answer back and we can start to take back the messaging and set the message ourselves. So unfortunately, what you see coming from our party right now is it's what I call a top-down approach. There's a small group of people that are telling us what we need to do. And it's not always nuanced to the areas that we live in and what we call home. So I really want to take that back and I want to invert the pyramid. I don't want it to be top down. I want it to be grassroots from the precinct, county, and legislative district up into the region, and then really work that region to where we have a coalesced plan where, because as you know, we have counties that are contiguous to each other that are facing some of the same problems. And if we're working together, and Stephen, I'm glad to see you on tonight. I don't know, probably, I'm just going to guess. If you allow me to put words in your mouth, you can correct me later, but you would probably on a scale of 1 to 10, give the IDP a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10 on help that you got when you ran for LD1. So this, we want to change that. We want to be a party for the whole state. But that's going to take a whole comprehensive plan that's going to start from each county and each legislative district and have that flow up to the state level to where we actually have a coordinated plan that we're all working on together. So there have been and there are changes coming within the staff at the IDP. We have been underfunded for at least 10 years. And that's just not me saying that. I remember seeing Cecil Andrews was one of the last public interviews that he gave, where he said that our party was seriously underfunded. Because we've been underfunded, that's led to us being understaffed. And so our staff hasn't been able to get around and do as much as they could have or wanted to do. So one of the things that I'm going to set out to do too. So number one is the strategic plan that comes from the ground up, not the top down. Number two is we got to raise more money and we've got to get more people involved in contributing to our party so we can hire the staff that we need. That means some staff in Boise, but it also means getting field organizers for North Idaho. The third thing that I wanted to talk to you about, our messaging has been all over the place. In fact, I think it's reflective of the state of our party right now. We have fractured relationships with our elected people, the legislators that are serving us right now. There's a fracture between them and the party. There's a fracture between us and the unions. I've talked to every single union representative that's on the Central Committee, and it's complete agreement across the board that we've got to reach back out and establish a relationship with them. But I've already started that, and I want to continue to build on that. But guys, we've got to learn how to speak Idahoan again, and we've got to do it smartly. And that messaging that we have of, you know, trying to find economic opportunity for everyone and making sure that people get the education they need to be able to fill and create jobs or be part of filling a job need that somebody might have. So these are all things that, you know, we've got to focus on. But we've got a unique situation, and I think Bernie Sanders did us a tremendous job in reminding us of where we want to be. Unfortunately, in the voting process, it was determined that Bernie and his message wasn't the time for right now. And this isn't a pro-Biden speech. I'm saying that Bernie set a lofty goal for us of things we want to strive for and things we want to reach for. But the messaging that we have today, the messaging of how to reach to our fellow Idahoan, has got to be tweaked. And we've got to lead with the right things. It's like in boxing, you never want to lead with your chin. And unfortunately, we've done some of that. And I want to take that back, and I want to make sure that we have a regional message that makes sense to the people that live next to us, but is also something that keeps in mind what we're trying to strive and reach for as we also educate people. So that, in a nutshell, is what I'm hoping to do. Jimmy, I don't know what questions you guys might have, but I'm here and available.
So I guess I'm just going to open it up for questions, and anybody that wants to start asking, just feel free. There's a small amount of us here. I'm going to try and keep track. If somebody tries to interject, let's all just try and be, give it a little bit of time in between to see if somebody wants to pop in and ask a question. Looks like Sean's got his hand up. Sean, your mic's muted.
Thanks, Jimmy. Hi, Fred. Thanks for being here tonight. I'm glad that we're kind of doing a state tour so we all get to hear your plan and vision for the future of the party here. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. So, Fred, my question is, in your opening spiel here, you mentioned, field organizers in North Idaho. Do you have any plan that you've kind of thought about and how to get us there?
Well, I think we have to look at the 2020 election results. I think we have to look at 2018 results, and we have to identify the areas that we can focus on and be successful and build from that first. But we have to look at the demographics. We have to look at the statistics. There's groups out there that have done that. The party has some of those statistics as well, but look at some of the races that happened even in your own region where, if I remember correctly, that there was a commissioner position that was lost by just 1,000 or 1,500 votes or something like that, along with large segments of what would have been Democrat-leaning voters didn't vote. And so that's an opportunity that we lost. But that opportunity still exists. So we have to go area by area. Some of you may not know this, but Valley County and McCall has a high percentage of Democratic voters. It's been ignored. It's not been nurtured or developed much. But same thing, there are areas and pockets of Democratic leaning voters that we could take advantage of. And we need to focus and work in those areas first. But that's going to be part of the strategic plan. That's where, it's going to start at the county and legislative district levels, where you guys know the statistics best. But if you take that and combine it with a well-equipped IDP staff, we need a statistics information director, which we haven't had. That's different from being the political director, like what Jesse's been filling or something like that. But yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. This has got to be done surgically. It's got to be done intentionally, but it's got to be done thoughtfully.
I'm going to jump in real quick. I don't know if it's necessarily a question, but I kind of want to, more or less a statement. At our last election, we have one Democrat, Senator Dave Nelson, that represents District 5. Dave won by just less than 200 votes. And then the two reps lost by, I think, 1,200 and 1,500 votes, respectively.
Yeah.
Right about that, and we knocked on a lot of doors over here. Dave is tenacious when it comes to knocking on doors. And people know who he is. Dan Foreman, who ran against him, was, I don't know if I probably don't got to remind any of you, but, he's the guy that put up we need to hang mothers and doctors but from the neck till dead if they have an abortion. He did nothing. He did absolutely nothing. He didn't knock on a door. He didn't fundraise. His party hardly endorsed him. And so I guess the facts on the ground here in Benoit are, we have in Plummer a lot of Democrat leaning votes on the tribe Coeur d'Alene tribe, who basically, I think feel disaffected and don't come out to vote. And I feel like we've lost ground amongst our tribes who would be, there's 1,000 tribal members right there that if we could motivate to, 1,000 registered voters, if we could get motivated to vote for Democrats, we could flip my district and it would have 3 Democrat representatives. But as it is right now, I worry about Dave Nelson's next thing. So I think an approach that's kind of per county and per area, per legislative district is the approach that I want to see rather than kind of a more top-down approach. So that's what I got to say.
When you add to that too, Jimmy, that 30% of the voters in Idaho are unaffiliated. There's 1,040,000 registered voters in Idaho, and over 300,000 of them are unaffiliated. And reaching out and engaging them and activating them to vote Dem is a very achievable goal if we message right. So that's another part that we need to be aware of.
Hey, Fred, this is Sean again. I got another question. Looking at, a place like Georgia and how successful they were being able to flip the state in all kinds of ways. Stacy took a look at the data, just like you're suggesting we do, of course. And by the way, the last person we had looking at our data really hard was a gentleman named Tom Hamilton. And we haven't had a person since him doing that at all. So anyways, I agree with you on that point. But looking at, Stacy, look at the data and was looking at, okay, well, how are we going to flip these voters who are registered? How are we going to message to these registered voters? Well, she took a totally different approach. Instead of trying to message to the existing registered voters, she went out and found 600,000 new voters and registered them, and then turned them out to vote. Do you think we have that kind of opportunity here in Idaho?
Georgia, Virginia, Georgia, Colorado, and Arizona are all states that have been flipped in the last 10 years. And I think there's some similarities and things that we can learn from Georgia. But Georgia's effort specifically, we saw, in the last 120 days, was that they went into specific targeted areas of high dense population, unregistered voters or registered voters who didn't vote even in November. And they targeted those groups. So and Georgia had a 10-year plan. And I'm afraid we're looking at least a 10-year plan. Some of us have talked about even 15 years to move the needle substantially and turn it into a true battleground state. So Sean, it's going to take some effort, and it's going to take what you just said, going out and identifying unregistered voters. But our messaging, in Idaho, we're lagging about 15 years behind. And this is just my own observation. This isn't a statistic I can back up, but my gut tells me that on progressive issues, we're about 15 years behind as a state culturally. And that means that if we're going to change, we're not only running as public servants and trying to win races, but we're also educating as we go. But if the party doesn't have a message that's consistent and it's done with our partners, Conservation Voters of Idaho has one of the best get out the vote campaigns that we saw operational here in the state. They've got a ton more money for that kind of programming than what we ever have had at the IDP. So, we don't necessarily have to burn our precious cash to get access to that data and to participate in voter registration, like you're pointing out. You're right on. We can, if we go back and we partner, our relationship with like Conservation Voters of Idaho, that relationship doesn't exist. I talked to them 2 weeks ago. They couldn't remember the last time they talked to one of the officers of the IDP. They couldn't remember it. I talked to the union. It had been 2.5 years since they had heard from the chairperson of the IDP. Those are our partners. There's almost 50,000 members of union membership now in the state. And they haven't heard from us. I mean, these are the partners we need to do the very things you're talking about, to identify those voters, get the ones that aren't registered, the ones that are registered, get them out to vote. And that's really the bottom line of what Stacey did. Remarkable things that they did there. I almost think, and I don't know if you read the book called The Blueprint, it's about how Colorado flipped. There are a number of lessons from that book that could help us. There's a couple things. Arizona, what caused it to flip was their emphasis on education. And we have the worst educational system in the United States. It's possible that we could take some of the things from Arizona and adapt them and bring them into Idaho and lead with that. So yeah, there's a number of things we could do and do better, but we got to partner, and we're going to have, and there's people out there that have been wanting and waiting to partner with us. They're old partners. They're partners we used to partner with, but they want to partner again, but they haven't been reached out to. Our party has shrunk at the very time our population in Idaho has been increasing. And I know I've heard it that, the people that are moving into Idaho are all conservative, but I'll tell you, here in the Treasure Valley, I'm hearing guys say, the Republicans moving up from California, and they see the buckaroos, as I call them, the radical right, with, walking around Target with a gun on their hip, and they're going, whoa, hold on a second. I'm a Republican, but that's not the kind of Republican I am. And some of these guys that are coming from California, I think are more moderate in nature, and I think they're winnable. So you're spot on, Sean, but I think we can learn from Stacey. I think there's a lot more lessons we can learn from Colorado and Arizona and Virginia. If you had a chance to study that at all, really where they came from was they had door-to-door campaigns that were intense, and they targeted areas, and they built, again, that was a 7-year plan in Virginia where they targeted neighborhoods, they won them over, and then they'd recruit volunteers from those newly won neighborhoods, and they would spread them out. They made them missionaries, evangelists, and they grew, and Virginia was able to flip as well. So I think there's something we can learn from each one of those states.
All right, looks like Evan Koch has his hand raised to ask a question. Evan?
Hi, thank you, Jim. And hi, Fred, thank you for joining us. It was very nice to speak with you a couple of weeks ago. I could not help but wonder what makes you think that the knowledge base is from the grassroots. That is to say, why would somebody like me, a first-time county chair, know more than somebody who's at the IDP and has been doing this, like somebody like Larry LaRocco or somebody who's been doing this for a long time? Why should you rely on me and people like me, people, who are basically volunteers a couple hours a week to do this, right, and to give you direction?
You know, that's a great question. And Evan, the concept of the party as a toolbox, if you need a screwdriver, we don't want to hand you a hammer. But if you need a hammer, I want to have a hammer ready, right? So if you need help with understanding the statistical nuances of your area, we want to come alongside and help in those ways. We also want to use consultants. Some of you know about Scrap Shop recently, and unfortunately, I think they're getting drugged through the mud and shouldn't be. They're a very helpful group that has a lot of useful information. Their primary focus has been the Treasure Valley. And so I think they need to be used carefully and intentionally. But yeah, we need to bring in, and a field organizer is going to help as well, especially one that's experienced. You know, one of the most common things I've heard, Evan, has been that the IDP has been an internship program. And that means that a lot of the people we've had there have been too young. And if we can hire field organizers that are older and have more experience, I'm not talking hiring 50-year-olds. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people that have had 10 years of field experience that can come into your community, sit down and talk with you, get to know the people in the area, and help build what that strategy is. The thing about a strategic plan is, in the business world, it's a living document. It's not something you complete and then you set it up on your shelf and you refer to it, you know, every 2 or 3 years. It's something that you can tweak, and because it's yours, you guys can be the ones that change it. So, and as you learn more and you get to know your area and you hear more information and hear other strategies that other counties or districts are using, you can adapt those things. You can help change the course. I think it's important that the field organizers have almost two bosses in a way. They have to be accountable to you guys in your areas, but at the same time, you know, they're going to have to be getting direction and guidance and support from the office in Boise. But we can't forget North Idaho, and you obviously, we need as many people as we can hire, right? Because we have such a huge mission in front of us. But this, you make a great point. And I think if we all listen to each other and share, unfortunately, some of our leadership has said, some of us need to sit down and shut up and listen. And that was because there's been a group of people among us that have been marginalized, and we haven't listened to them enough. But as I've talked to marginalized people, what they're telling me is, they're saying, we don't want you to shut up. We want to talk. We want to know what you're thinking. Let's actually have a dialogue. And so, Evan, I'm hoping that we can have a dialogue and that your strategic plan will be a living organism that we can change and adapt and intensify and sometimes back off. Or, I mean, it's going to be like driving a car, and each county and each district is going to have one.
Thanks. I might check out of this Zoom conference because Kootenai County is having a not a competing Zoom, but a different Zoom, more having to do with gerrymandering, and I want to take part in that as well. But thanks a lot.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you for joining, Evan. I want to kind of riff off of Evan's comment a little bit, if you don't mind, and ask, I guess, you know, part of the thing that I've seen as a problem being a new chair is having a clear delineation of the party structure and how it works and how the pieces operate together when elections happen, who is in charge of that. I mean, what can we do to better communicate to our members how all the parts work together?
Yeah. Jimmy, one of the problems we've had because of our short staffedness is that we haven't done as much training as we should. I've talked to a number of our county chairs that are new. I probably have talked to 10, 12 people that are new to their position in the last 6 months. And there's been very little training that's been available to them. And there's a ton of training out there. There's training through the DNC. There's also training from some of the larger states that we're contiguous to that would be useful. but we almost need a full-time trainer that's going around and providing opportunities to educate you on how to even recruit precinct captains. What kind of person do you look for? You know, and what does a precinct captain do? And all the way up into the county and district chairs. Training is one of our weak spots right now.
Looks like Stephen Hallett's raising his hand there. You got something to say, Stephen?
Yeah, I do. And it's an observation I've had for the last 6 years as I've been a member of the candidacy. I think one of our biggest goals should try to be convincing people that they can be candidates. You go up and you talk to who I would say is a qualified person to be a candidate, and they'll go, oh, no, or whatever their reason is. I think candidacy participation is the number one obstacle that we face. Everybody can go out and make phone calls. I don't know if people are afraid to fail because they come from a successful business, if they're too busy. But in Boundary County, Bonner County, LD1, that's our biggest challenge, is to get somebody who's notable in the community to go out and throw their hat into the ring. I was relatively obscure. Well, actually, nobody knew me except for a few people in my town. In 6 years, quite a few people have gotten to know me, and it doesn't seem to be enough. But that's where we need to put a lot of emphasis, at least up here in District 1, is getting qualified legislative candidates. And we know that. We have committee trying to find people, and it's hard to do. Nancy. Anyways, that also has to be number 4 if it's not number 1.
Yeah. No, this continuing to recruit good candidates, we just haven't had enough. And see, part of it is, and I've talked to a number of people who've thought about running because the SCC is a natural place to look for them. They don't see a party support system in place. They don't see an infrastructure in place to support them in running. You've got some guys like Steve Birch who have gone over and above, to help people, educate them on how to run a campaign. But it's been suggested. In fact, I think it was Sean that was it? I don't want to speak for Sean, but it seems like it was Sean that was saying that we don't do anything for people that are running campaigns either. We don't have many training opportunities for people that are just first-time campaign managers, because you need that. If you're going to run as a candidate and you're going to be viable, you can't be doing it all yourself. And so, if you're going to run, you need training, but what about your staff and having training in place for them as well? I think all of those things is going to encourage more people to run if they see that there's a structure in place that supports them.
All right. Is there anybody else out there who would like to say something? Everybody's mics are muted. So if you'd like to say something, just unmute your mic. Sylvia Humes?
Yes. I'd like to know what everyone thinks about rhinos. I believe that in Bonner County, anyway, we have a number of Democrats who have registered Republican only so they think that they are voting for the better Republican in the primaries. But in the meantime, when we look at and I'm guesstimating, but I don't think I'm too far off. When we look at registration and we've got 14,000 Republicans and 2,000 Democrats, I don't think that is really encouraging anyone to run.
It'd be tough, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know what you think the number of rhinos are in that group. Do you have a gut guess on how many?
What do you think? I don't have a guess. We have a lot of active people within our women's democratic group and with other nonprofits in the area. And there just are a number of them. And I've been trying to convince them that they need to register Democrat. And if they think they have to be a Republican for a primary, just switch back.
Right.
But people don't do that. So I don't know. I consider it one of the problems. It's not the biggest problem, but I think it contributes to the problem. We need to look viable to be viable.
Yeah, Sylvia, do you mind if I jump in on that topic as well? I agree with you. The fact that the Republicans have a closed primary here, and the fact that we can't seem to elect Democrats here, it does feel like if you want to participate and have your say, in who's going to be, leading the area, that you do, whether you're a Democrat, independent, unaffiliated, you got to register as a Republican in order to have that say. And so that really, really skews our data. And so for those of us who are, trying to run campaigns and try, and like Steve's saying, trying to recruit candidates, when we're looking at our data and we show them, oh yeah, well, the cards are stacked against you.
Right.
We don't have a real good sense of, how many Democrats we do have and can count on. And so, that data skewing is just, it's a nightmare to deal with. I don't know how we rectify it, but we've got to try to figure out, a reasonable solution for everyone, so that we can, when we're looking at, sending out campaign messaging, door knocking, all the things that candidates need to do to contact voters, we need to be able to, know who we're talking to. And, if they're registered as a Republican, oftentimes our candidates will shy away from those doors.
Well, I think, excuse me, but I think that, and we try very hard here to keep our vote builder right up to date. I mean, I don't care if somebody just gives me a phone call, or any of us a phone call, and is interested in our ideas, and they're leaning more toward us, which we've had. I get their name on Vote Builder and their information, so that at least we have that capability. We feel we're pretty concise as far as the people we have placed on Vote Builder. It's helped us, but that's still not the voter registration list. That's not, that a candidate doesn't see that. We can tell them that we have that capability, but I don't know.
Fred, do you want to speak to this real quick? I have a couple other people that have questions up, and I don't want to neglect other hands that are up.
Well, I think one of the ways to identify a rhino, and there's rhinos all over the state. I won't say his name, but a very popular mayor here in the Treasure Valley is a Democrat, but he's got an R by his name, and he always has had. But when you look at the results of like Reclaim Idaho, here, even though it was endorsed, I don't think that was like a litmus test to say, hey, we really have, the state is 62% Democrats. I think that would be false thinking, because you had people like Butch Otter and some other prominent Republicans that came out in favor of and endorsed that initiative. But I think you can look and see where the Republicans are that have heart, that actually care about other people and did vote in favor of this, but especially where working class people live that maybe didn't have insurance and knew this was a way to get insurance for their family. And you do overlays in areas and you're able to target, and you take Reclaim Idaho's information, that's another indication of where you can spot where there's rhinos. We want to attract those moderates.
All right, Savannah Casey, you've had your hand up for a while there.
Hi, so I'm also from Kootenai County.
Hi, Savannah.
And I just want you to have this information as a background. We have 62,000 GOP registrations in the county and 12,600 Democratic registrations. Now there is a group of like almost 31,000 independents, but we don't know which way they really go, and we don't know which way they vote. But even if we got every single one of them, we still would be at a fairly disadvantaged position. So really what I'm asking is, what's the point of running candidates at this time in our history? For us, I'm talking Kootenai County. What would you suggest to us? Because in the Reclaim Idaho year, we had two excellent candidates in Coeur d'Alene running for the state legislature. And one of them raised $60,000 more than the other, but both were very active with door knocking, and the whole community of Democrats came out and just pounded the pavement and made the phone calls and did everything we knew to do. And in the end, both of them earned 1/3 of the vote and lost by 2/3. The money didn't seem to make any difference. Our amount of effort didn't. So while I'm interested in us being able to run candidates, at this point, I personally don't see what the point is.
No, and that you're right on. And this goes back to Sean's question to me earlier about what happened in Georgia. Georgia was facing something very similar 10 years ago. And what they did was they started targeting the most available offices. In some cases, it was the library board, the irrigation district, the highway district positions. They started there and began to build, and especially the dark areas of Georgia. But you have to start somewhere. And I can't imagine, Ada County used to be, Democrat, but there's twice as many Republicans now in Ada County than there are registered Democrats. So even Ada County, West Ada is gone red. But I have to believe that of those 12,000 people, 12,600, almost 13,000 in Kootenai County, that there's quality people that are gifted and talented, just like you mentioned. People got behind them, gave them money, helped support them to get out there and do as well as they could. But maybe we were reaching too far, given those kinds of ratios. Maybe we need to target, school board of trustees and things such as that. But that's up to the county and to the legislative district. And if I come along and I think you're shooting too low, I'm going to encourage you to raise your vision. But at the same time, with these kinds of numbers that you're talking about, and it's pretty consistent on over half of our counties in the state, we don't have any presence at all. I won't mention the county, but I was talking to her and I almost felt like I needed to call the police. She's the county chair. In this county, there's well, I better not say, because then you'd go and look, what county it was, but it was a number that was just barely over, 3 figures. And she's discouraged. And she said, I'd love it if we just had 10 or 15 people coming out to our quarterly potlucks. That's where she's trying to start. And then we got talking, and there's a contiguous county that tends to be more Democrat than the one she's from. And I said, well, what if we sent people from that county to help you? And she said she loved that. And I said, what if you got in your car and drove, because it's just 30 miles from where she's at to where this, the county seat is in this Democrat county. She hadn't thought about partnering with a contiguous county. But how would we know that unless we're getting together and talking? And I just happen to be the two that I happen to be the person that put the two people together. But I can't help but think there's about 140,000 registered Democrats in Idaho, 300,000 unaffiliates. Let's say we've been averaging around 250,000 statewide, pretty consistently. I think President Biden got 280,000 votes or something like that. But I have to think that with 250,000 people in this state, if I have to send you 10 people from Ada County to help get out and knock on more doors and go and try to register and get people to vote where we know there are Democrats, whether it's a reservation or susceptible areas in certain counties like in Benoit, we're going to do it. We have to do this. I don't want us to think from a scarcity mindset. I want us to think in the sense that the last 4 presidential elections, that we've had anywhere between 200 and 280,000 people in Idaho that voted for a Democratic president. And that tells me something. And there's 250,000 people, but right now we're like 5-6 states because our party hasn't led in a way that has grouped our regions together. And sometimes because we've been understaffed, to be fair to our officers and our staff, we've been so understaffed that they've forgotten Eastern Idaho. They've forgotten Northern Idaho. And we can't do that. We're a statewide party. And if that means loading a bunch of people on a bus and sending them up to you, making you some soup, whatever it takes to get you encouraged again, I'm going to do it. And, but I live in Boise. I lived in Rathdrum for a couple of years. I've got properties in Post Falls. And so I've been traveling to Kootenai County for a long time. I know how tough it can be, and I know about the physical threats and the protesting that's gone up there. And I think that's been downplayed by some of the rest of us in other parts of the state. And it's not easy to be public with who you really are. And I think by building a stronger party, we're going to be able to stand up to the bullies, and we're going to be able to make change. But it's going to be particularly hard in North Idaho. I wish we could put them on a bus and send them somewhere else, but
I'm not suggesting that we stop being Democrats or that we stop doing outreach. I'm suggesting that doing it around running candidates is a foolish way to spend money. There's got to be something better to build the party to the point where it could stand on its feet.
I see what you're saying. Okay, now that's...
Jimmy, could I add something as a guest to that?
Sure.
Savannah, I lost twice before I won a seat in Congress. Richard Stallings lost before he won. C. Sanders lost before he won. Frank Church lost before he won. It means a lot to have candidates out there with the message. And what we're entering into is a civil war with the Republicans right now. It's going to be bloody, and we don't know where it's going to end up. In 1978, they had 7 candidates for governor, and they chose the wrong one, and we were able to win. So we don't know what's going to happen, and candidates don't know. So I would just add that Fred's, I think, would take over the party or be chair at a time when there's huge opportunity. And across the country, there are Republicans who are deregistering. And I know we're in a tough state here, but I can't imagine that there aren't a few who have rethought that. The last thought I'll leave you is that I would not have been a member of Congress if I didn't have independents and moderate Republicans vote for me. So people do move around. Thank you, Jimmy, for that opportunity.
Thank you, Larry. I have a couple other things I'd like to ask. Does anybody else out there that hasn't spoken yet have anything they'd like to ask? Oh. Stephen, you're raising your hand. Go ahead and
yeah, I'll just chime in on Larry's comment. Up here, if we do not run candidates, they'll run someone for us. That's the reason that I jumped into the candidate ring running for state representative, is because John Bircher ran as a Democrat. We had another ultra-conservative Freedom Caucus member run for a state senator. In fact, 6 years ago, he was our candidate for Senate. And that's what's important, Savannah. I think that's the one reason, if nothing else, that we need to have candidates out there, is so that they don't take the party away from us. And I endorse that sentiment.
I chime in and agree with you there, Stephen. I think it's important to have candidates running. if for nothing else, that somebody else doesn't pop into the spot. Anybody else have something they'd like to say there?
Yeah.
Hey, Kathy.
I do. So, Steve, I was wondering, what type of support did you or did you not get from the party that we could improve on, make better, whatever?
I think locally, our committees did what they could for me. On a state level, I joined the coordinated campaign, and I basically didn't get much out of it. I got access to Vote Builder, which any county has access to. I had the ability to talk to any number of the staff if I had a problem. My first time running, I was on the coattails of a lot of money, legislative campaign contributions to McAllister up here. And so I was on a coattail first time candidacy, but I was flat out told, we're not going to help you. We're going to try to get Kate in. Kate now has successfully run, has become a city council member in Sandpoint. The Idaho Democratic Party 2 years ago focused up here on Kootenai County. And last time, this most recent campaign, they focused it on Eastern Idaho. So it wasn't that they didn't have perceived threats. They just had priorities, and they put their limited staff in those directions. As far as getting out the calls, I had to rely just on people in my district to do that, which is what it should be. Now, on a statewide basis, and I'll just put this out there, there are people asking the state Democratic Party what they could do to help defeat Heather Scott. And they suggested they could donate to the Democratic Party, and then they would donate half of that money to the candidate that was running against Heather Scott. Now, Gail was a placeholder, and that's all she was. And she ran all the way to the general election, didn't run a campaign, but I don't even know if she accepted monies, but the Idaho Democratic Party was willing to take money statewide to defeat Heather Scott. I ran an active campaign, and monies from the Democratic Party were non-existent. So that's what happened to me. And so, you know, they can't help everybody. And running is something that you're supposed to do on your own. You're supposed to get backing from members in your district. And I got what I got. And I appreciate every bit of help I got.
So did... So did you feel like you got your money's worth from what you put in?
Oh, that's an arbitrary, that's hard to say. Sure, the fact that I got to use Vote Builder and have been trained in Vote Builder, that's a great takeaway. I can always use that to help somebody else.
Okay.
All right, we've got about...
I question that all the time, what we're actually doing for our candidates who are putting all the money into the pot. And that's the only answer I've gotten is Vote Builder.
Yeah, so, well, the first time we had a field worker, and 90% of that man's work was done in collecting information that went to Tom Hamilton's Vote Builder, and then he was able to disseminate that. They actually refused to mention the candidates that were running because they were running what they were calling a cloak surveillance for voters, saying that they were with the Idaho, I can't remember the actual fake name they were using, but they were with Idaho voters trying to get this information. Go ahead.
Idaho Voter Project.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And they brought it, they got the information in, but they refused to mention candidate names. And that's where our money went. And then afterwards, we were able to get their names, and then we could go ahead and call them.
Wow. So that leads me to my question for Fred, since you got to listen to what Steve said.
Sean ran a campaign. He ran a great campaign. He's got as much input as I have.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering how we could support our candidates better when they're putting this money into the state, and what are they going to get back for the money they're putting in?
Well, and this is upside down. I'm not a big believer in candidates having to give money to the party. It seems like to me it should be the other way around. And that's something that I saw, up close and personal from within inside watching this last election cycle, especially on the statewide campaigns. But, there are right now, there's Next Gen, which, hires field organizers. Unfortunately, they're short-term positions. They tend to be close to the election cycle. Whereas hopefully field organizers, the kind of plan that I'm hoping we can develop is going to be year round, and it's not going to be intensely tied to, an election cycle. But Next Gen is doing something that our party should have been doing, and that is providing websites. And I don't know how up to date your county Democratic pages are on Facebook. That's another way of having a line in the water, right? You have Democrats that are in your areas, they're looking to get involved. The first place they're going to go and look is on Facebook. And but these are the kind of things that, whether it's a website, whether it's printed materials, we've been recruiting a number of candidates to, thanks, Sean. And we've been recruiting a number of candidates because we're hoping that we get 3 or 4 statewide candidates that can really run together and message together. And then you take printed materials where you stick local candidates on the same flyer as we do our statewide candidates. That's going to lift too. That's another way that we can help.
So we've got a couple minutes till we're to the end of the time that Fred said that he would give us this evening. Is there any other questions out there before we get wrapped up?
Jimmy, I've got a question.
Yeah, sorry. Just state your
Jerry.
Jerry White. Hi, Jerry. Go ahead.
Fred, how would you raise the funds to pay for all of that?
Well, I happen to know an assessor up in Shoshone County that might be able to raise taxes and get us. No, I'm by the way, some of you don't know, Jerry is the assessor in Shoshone County. This is a tricky one because Dakota, who's on our staff, actually put together a very successful, what I'd consider small contribution campaign. I think we raised $130,000 or $140,000 in 2020 through small donations, and that's an important part of building slowly the building blocks necessary to really fund a staff at the levels we need it to be. But I think the most telling thing is that there are only 4 donors in the entire state that are giving more than $5,000 a year to the IDP. Only 4. And there are a substantial number of well-off Democrats that could be contributing. And I've already started to romance. I can't make any promises, but my goal is to raise $200,000 to $250,000 a year just from the larger donors that have either used to give and didn't like the direction we were going. People that have been disengaged because they haven't been asked. And number 3, just they're individuals that have been watching and maybe are seeing the need to, even though it's going to take years to see a return on investment, because a business person is going to be looking, saying, hey, I'm going to give you money, but what's my return on investment? It's like, how do you move that needle? And how do you get a measurable objective that, do we move it 4 or 5% a year? Is that our hope? Is that too much? Is it 3%? Are we going to have maybe 1% the first year and then next year it'll be 7%? But these Jerry, the question is a great one, and it's going to have to be, it's going to have to come from a number of people. We've got to keep building on the small donor program, which Dakota's doing, and not everything. Guys, right now, the IDP staff has been trashed. Some of these people are some of the most loyal, hardworking people, and they've been understaffed, and some of them have been let go because the results weren't great, but it was because we're underfunded as a party. And I don't believe in going out and firing staff if they didn't have the resources they needed to be able to do the job that we're asking them to do. So we got to get more money in. Dakota is one of those examples of having raised a lot of money this last year. We want to keep building on the small donor program, but we also have to increase the larger donations as well.
Great idea. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
All right, Fred, I guess I'm gonna, unless somebody else wants to jump in and get another question, I'm gonna give you one last question and kind of riff off of what Jerry was just talking about and what Savannah was talking about. And I think like messaging going forward, I think it's important for us to remember in Idaho that we passed Medicaid expansion the first year that Trump got elected. Florida passed a $15 minimum wage and elected Trump. A lot of our ideas are popular. And at the same time, though, we have this kind of like dismal voter registration problem up here in the north. I guess my question would be, are there other things that we can do? Wouldn't messaging might be as helpful or more helpful than trying to put feet on the ground? I mean, there's places where I'm at up here in the north where I worry about people getting shot, you know, or shot at. There's been people up here that have shot at census workers in Benoit County. So I think, you know, you look around the state, and I know I've showed you this, Fred, but up here in the north, we've got all kinds of these like propaganda papers that go out that support Republican ideals. I think that Kootenai County's got stuff like this. We've got this in Benoit and Latah County. Lots of anti-LGBTQ hatred and awful stuff. And, you know, we got articles by Janice McGeechan and Ammon Bundy on here. And I feel like we're losing a messaging war and a propaganda war. And I think, you know, maybe some of our money could be spent towards helping alleviate some of the problem we're having in organizing by putting out some messaging that's counter to all this right-wing propaganda.
So you've got that mailing piece that went all over the county. It probably went over multiple counties, and you know, really taking advantage of, most newspapers are hungry for content right now. You know, writing a series of and sharing even on Facebook articles that are written by and published in Idaho papers. You know, somebody's not going to read in North Idaho. They're not going to read something from the New York Times or the Washington Post. And Congressman LaRocco and I have talked about this, the need to identify good articles that are written in Lewiston or in Coeur d'Alene that reflect democratic values, and pushing those out into the ether and getting them into social media. But I think having pieces of literature that are mass mailed, those help in the changing of the message. You know, they have a pretty low effectiveness rate. I think the statistics are around 2 to 3%. It's more affirming to those that already believe those ways. But I think the bottom line is how in the world do you take back the narrative of telling the community who you are instead of letting them do it? And that's part of the strategies that we've got to do. We've got to talk about, and we've got to support that from the state. We've got to go out and get money to do that kind of thing. But some of that's going to have to happen organically, but it's also going to have to happen, you know, part of the leadership that we can provide as the state to identify articles in Blackfoot that might, you know, catch the attention of people in Bonners Ferry. We've got to be able to do that.
And I think in speaking Idahoan, like you say, you know, I think personally, I think we got a message on things that we are winning with in polls, like healthcare, and attack healthcare as a matter of personal freedom. I think also we should be messaging more on cannabis legalization. We have a lot of cannabis. It's part of our platform, and we have a lot of anti-cannabis bills that are getting put forward right now, and very restrictive medical bill. We should be, in my opinion, messaging more on that, and how we also do with funding with education. Up here in the North, I think healthcare, education, personal freedom, I think are all some big, winners across the board for Republicans, Democrats, and Independents.
Yeah, spot on.
So anybody else got questions out there before we let Fred go for the evening? Well, Fred, I'll let you wrap it up. I really appreciate you joining us this evening. And I want to remind everybody that at the same time tomorrow, we've got the incumbent chair doing the same thing, little Q&A session with Van Beechler. So I want to invite you all back for that. Thank you very much again, Fred. And thank you to all who came and showed up tonight.
James, Kathy, thank you for organizing this. Thank you, Fred.
You're
Talk to
welcome.
you soon.
Thank you, everybody. It was great.
Thanks, everybody.